everybody, it's Romania Black. We're on episode 6 of Revolutionary Girl Utena, and by this point, the first episode's out on Patreon. So, if that gives you any indication of how far I've watched ahead. So, yeah, I'm not telling anybody at the moment on Patreon how far I've watched ahead, but yeah, that's the thing. So there were a lot of comments. I actually have comments to talk about. I feel like when I started Berserk and I watched so many episodes ahead in the 97 anime, and then suddenly in one episode I was like, so here's all these 20 comments. Which is fine, because I feel like since this is a complete series, it's the 39 episodes plus the movie, I will have to have a live stream eventually for this series, and when I have a live stream, I will be able to talk about even the comments that I don't get to during the reactions themselves. I'm sure I will probably wait until the entire movie and series have come out on both Patreon and YouTube before doing said live stream. So by that point, all of those comments will have built up and I can talk about them all on the live stream. It will all work out. Your comments will be addressed in one shape or form if they need to be. So that's kind of how I look at it. So I don't feel bad watching ahead, because I'm going to talk about the comments and all the information that I find interesting at some point regardless. So, with that being said, I do have a lot of comments to talk about, though, so we might as well dive into that. We're going to talk about the creator Ikuhara a little bit. To preface, and I think I talked about this a few episodes back, Ikuhara was someone that I knew about in name only when I was watching Neon Genesis Evangelion, because Anno's a huge fan of Ikuhara, and so he based one of his characters, supposedly, allegedly, probably, on Kaoru from Neon Genesis, on Ikuhara himself. So I knew about him, but I didn't know who he was, and so now I'm like, oh, the director for Sailor Moon. That makes sense. Okay, cool. So not the mangaka, but the director. Whereas Anno is like the creator and director of Neon Genesis. Ikuhara is directing a series written by a woman. Different story, different strokes, all same universe. So Pancake pointed out that the creator Ikuhara worked on Sailor Moon before this series, but had started a Bipapas studio after season 4 of Sailor Moon in 1996. And the transitions in French they're not because of the files, they're just because. That's probably the funniest thing I've learned so far about this series. I thought because Anthony's giving me the files to watch for this series, I'm like, oh, well, maybe it's because I don't know where Anthony on Patreon is from, to be honest. I was like, well, maybe Anthony's just getting these because they're French files and they just have the French Blu-ray, and that's it. No, it's a damn stylistic choice. No wonder Anna was simping for Ikuhara. No wonder. That's the funniest thing to me. The funniest. Shimoyama as well as Jasmine both talk about, we'll get into this, Takahazuka review, Takaharazuka review, which we'll talk about in a second, but Shimoyama says Ikuhara influenced Anno, but was also influenced by Rose of Versailles director Dezaki, which, just real quick side note about Rose of Versailles, because I know Rose of Versailles has been influenced into Berserk, it's been influenced into this series, I know Mappa is doing a movie of it, why we can't do Yuri on Ice, I don't know, but we're doing this, but, that's my own soapbox. I do want to read the manga Rose of Versailles at some point. I would honestly rather read the manga first and then watch the movie, because I know the movie is just going to be a little part of the manga, but we'll get to that eventually. So please no Rose of Versailles spoilers. I don't want to know too much about Rose of Versailles. I'm already getting indications of what it's about, and anytime I get spoilers, it makes me want to not watch or read the series even less, because I like going in completely blind. But I know of Rose of Versailles. I know it involves 2 women. That's all I know. That's all I want to know. But yeah, anyway. So they talk about Japan has a history of the Takaharazuka Revue, which is a theater made up of all female actresses, which reminded me a lot of Shakespearean theater. It's kind of the reverse of that. In Shakespearean theater, it was all men doing the roles, regardless of if they were women or men. Now, similarly to Shakespearean theater with the Takaharazuka, Shimoyama points out that it's not really that it's an LGBTQ community doing theater. It's actually, as Jasmine will confirm, a very conservative theater. It's just the idea of one gender doing all of the roles, and that's the thing. So it's actually kind of being contingent to gender constructs, even though it's subverting them inherently kind of like Shakespearean theater. A lot of people will be like, oh, well, Shakespearean theater were guys playing girl roles. And I'm like, well, yeah, that's because they wouldn't let women do anything. So there was really a reason for that. Now, since Shakespearean times, modern Western society especially, has subverted that in a lot of ways and drawn different implications out of it. But during the historical context, no, ladies just weren't allowed to have roles like that. So that's the reason why it was all men. And conversely, it's kind of a similar situation, seemingly from what they're telling me with the Takahara Azuka review, is that even though they're all female actresses, it's not so much that they're subverting gender expectations and being progressive. It's the fact that, no, this is just an art form and that's what they do. And that's just how it is. And it's like, okay. But Jasmine notes that there are five main troupes. There's the Oto Koyaku, which is the lead male role, which I think that kind of ties to not only Utena, but the idea of the Rose Bride duel. They're all competing to be the Oto Koyaku role of being the lead male because, as Jasmine notes, they're labeled as the top star. They play the lead. So that's what they're all competing to be. And it just so happens that Utena wants to be a prince, so that's the lead male role. So it all ties into that way. Then there is the Musumeyaku, which is the young girl or daughter role, which I don't know if I want to ascribe Anthe to that, but she kind of fits into it at the moment. But it elaborates Western-style musicals, and it is still a conservative institution. And Jasmine noted that their motto is be pure, be proper, be beautiful. That's a pretty, the whole be pure and proper is a very strict conservative mantra. And then the be beautiful, you know, you can tie that into other things as well. But I do think that that's interesting because that whole structure system of be pure, be proper, be beautiful, I definitely get with the student council, especially because Kiryuu at this point is very adamant about it being held in place. Kind of seems to be a reflection of that, whereas Kiryuu, because, you know, a few episodes ago, Mickey was like, I think we should dismantle the student council because we're not giving Anthe her freedom and we need to do that. And Kiryuu was like, hold on there, young man. Are we sure we want to do that? And he did a lot of manipulation to get Mickey to change his tune about it. But it very much seems that regardless, what's funny is Kiryuu, of all of them, doesn't seem to understand what he wants out of Anthe. He seems to be the one that doesn't get what he wants out of her or the Rose Bride, but he's keeping the structure in place because that's the only way he knows to move forward and to get what he wants. So that is interesting. And I feel like that whole phrase, be pure, be proper, be beautiful, is going to transcribe through this entire series as we go as a construct. So we'll just see what happens with that. But thank you both for your comments. Zanicho talks about, Zanicho was talking about the long hair and being kind of feminized, and Zanicho was like, well, in Japan, long hair was not always tied to a gender construct. It was Western influence that caused a lot of people in Japan to cut their hair. And I'm like, yeah, you're very right about that. That is very true. I also think of Sailor Moon, where you have Nephlite and he had the long hair. And I think, not Zoisite, but, the other one, the one that Zoisite liked, had long hair as well. So yeah, definitely could be. Saionji's hair is more traditional, like Kiryuu's, but it just seems out of place in this modern high school scenario. And then Oliver Jajado had a lot of comments. One of theirs was talking about Anthe's dot kind of maybe being connected to like the Hindu Buddhist like third eye, meaning hidden knowledge. She's containing the power of Dios in her, so that all kind of ties up and makes sense. Usually they said it's worn by a married person, but it could be modernized to just be an aesthetic cosmetic detail. So I thought that was interesting as well. And then I had some comments up here that I just copied and pasted because they were too much for me to write out. Oliver Jajado talks about, if you're interested, they are going to post short episode commentaries by the director. They're from the DVD release, and I find them to be quite insightful and enjoyable to read. I'm going to omit the spoiler parts. Thank you. But they're 95% spoiler-free anyway, and talk about the production of the show and Ikuhara's personal beliefs and backgrounds, sometimes worded in a rather confusing and eccentric style. Well, I don't know. Ano and Ikuhara, judging by the style of the shows they've directed, I can't imagine why they would be eccentric. But so anyway, let's talk about the first episode. We've kind of reached the end of the arc with Mickey, so we might as well talk about episode 1, The Rose Bride. During the process of getting from the plan to the production deal, I needed to convey the image of the show to a lot of stakeholders in a way that would be easy to understand. I cannot here's the thing. You could, with both Neon Genesis and this series, portray it to some stakeholders in a very easy to understand format. It's just, you don't get into the fine details, right? He says, so I made the written plan and it's something like this type of thing. And in fact, it got the gist across. I think it's what got us the green light on the production. However, when we finally entered the production stage, I was plagued with worry. Suddenly I was brooding over the show's originality and what it really was. The style of expression is key in a TV series, a unique individuality, a mode no one has ever seen before. There was this pressure of, I have to make this a show with a special type of visual expression. That's the only way people will want it. Yeah, I decided to use Absolute Destiny Apocalypse, and that prompted a switch to flip in my mind. Within myself, I could sense that this would be a special show, but it was hard to explain that specialness to the public during pre-production. Oh, I can't imagine! I talked about the show, I explained the characters, but no matter how bombastic I was, nobody understood me past the level of, it sounds like an eccentric show. So all throughout pre-production, I had these pangs of guilt, like I was deceiving someone. And then the first episode was given sound at last. It was complete. The impression of the first stakeholder to watch it was something along the lines of, huh? What is this? Yes! So, yeah, again, it would be hard to have a vision like this and to try to convey that while also being coherent enough. Because, yeah, here's the thing. I really appreciate what Ikuhara is saying here. Your show has to be unique, or it will blend in with the hundreds and hundreds of other shows. How many, like, random weird isekai are out there that's like, that time I was reincarnated into my best friend girlfriend's secret diary? Like, how many of those are out there and you just gloss over them like I've seen 100 of these. I don't want to watch these. But at least that's how I feel. Whereas, a story that is presented like Neon Genesis, it's just like, here's the style. It's what you think you know, but it takes a different spin on it. So you have to be unique and have creativity and some kind of like some kind of gimmick to switch the flip. To flip the switch. So I think that Utena definitely accomplishes that, but that is so fascinating. I cannot imagine the pressure of trying to convince a stakeholder of a series like this in the 90s and make it work. And it did. So cool. Awesome. And then this one user, their username is a trident, and I'm like, they said, I'm sorry I don't have a name for you. I just want to call you Trident for some reason, but I don't know why. They said that they read a reply to a comment saying how I didn't think there would be any magical girl series that would compare to Madoka. Let's see about that when we get to our OG Pink and Purple. And I was like, oh! Because I around the time this series is replacing Puella Magi Madoka Magica, and that series has a pink and purple haired pair of ladies who you could ship together. And then I'm like, oh, I didn't even realize when I started this that Utena and Anthe were like the pink and purple equivalent of that. Mind blown. Mind blown. So yes, so thank you for pointing that out. I think that's important. But yeah, I've talked for nearly 15 minutes, so I apologize. But I felt it was necessary to convey that. I'm so excited to get into episode 6. We wrapped up the little arc with Mickey. It was cute. There was a comment, though, from Oliver Jajadu talking about this. That I've been watching the previews, and so far they haven't been too spoilery, although they've told us that this episode's about Nanami. That's all I really know. But I do agree that once we start getting into, like, some of the bigger stake episodes, because we're still kind of at the beginning, I may not watch the previews, because that is correct. I don't want to be spoiled. So that is good to know. I've been tiptoeing against fate. I've been towing the line, been like, oh, we can watch the previews. But if we start to get into like a couple, I feel like past episode 10, I might stop. I feel like first 10 episodes, maybe it's not so bad. We'll see. If I feel like it's leaving on a cliffhanger, then I won't watch the episode, but we'll just wait and see. So I'm super excited, y'all. I hope y'all are too. Thank you so much for watching, but we're going to get started with episode 6 of Utena, Revolutionary Girl Utena. And we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's do it to it, Lars. This was the funniest damn episode so far. I don't see the need to bring out Whiteboard Kun at the moment, although we do have a lot to talk about, surprisingly. I feel like when I watch Neon Genesis Evangelion, again, we talk about who drew inspiration from who. It is what it is. But I do believe that there were some episodes of Neon Genesis that were kind of like wonky side episodes that you were just like, oh, that's just for fun. But usually, again, if we're talking about taking inspiration, who took inspiration from who, in Neon Genesis, and this isn't really a spoiler, but usually once you had that like silly side episode, then you'd be starting an arc where things got a little bit more serious. So now obviously I don't think Utena has gotten as serious as Neon Genesis, but I didn't want to watch the preview for this week because I had a feeling, I'm like, okay, we had this little silly side episode. We're setting a couple things up with Nanami, a few things, and some things up with Kiryuu. But I don't want to watch the preview because I kind of want to see what surprises are in store for episode 7. So I'm like, okay, all right. But this episode was bonkers. I loved it. So let's dive into this, shall we? First of all, this episode did a couple things. One, it really made me like Nanami's character. It honestly did. Nanami, back in episode 3, was on my shit list. I was like, girl, you're being a mean girl. I don't like you. But now, kind of like with Saionji, we'll talk about Saionji, the funniest part of this whole damn episode. With Nanami's character, once you figure out that that's her character trait, that she's very dramatic, she's very over the top, she very much loves her brother Kiryuu to an almost disturbing extent, but it is love, so okay. And mainly we'll talk about the whole love and the sibling thing and break that down because it's not exactly what I had thought it was at first. I'm like, oh, okay, gotcha. So we're going to talk about that to more extent here, but I felt a lot for Nanami in this episode. I really did. I came to feel kind of some empathy for her character, especially at the beginning here, because if you're a male viewer, I'm not saying that you don't understand this feeling because I know that there are some male presenting people out there that have had these same experiences. And so I don't want to say that you aren't included in this group, but I would say that primarily, and I'm just making an assumption, so I realize I could very well be proven wrong in the comments, but I would say that primarily if you are a woman living in modern times, especially in the US, you probably relate to this feeling of being kind of creeped out, right? And that's not to say it's every time. Like, I've walked the streets of Chicago at 3 a.m. with my best friend. I didn't feel unsafe necessarily, but we were in a quote unquote pretty touristy part of town, so it felt safer. And I've walked the streets of like Washington, D.C. late at night, but I was not alone. I was with a friend, strength in numbers. And I remember talking to a friend from college who was like, oh yeah, I go backpacking across Europe by myself. And that I'm like, I don't think I could ever do that. My cousin does that. She's been like couch hopping all across Africa and Europe, but she's fearless. And I'm like, girl, I don't think I could do it. I'm terrified of traveling alone sometimes because there is always that fear. It's kind of like my friend and I were talking about, like, it's scary to jog alone in the mornings because there's so many instances where women have been killed and women have been targeted for being by themselves. And I felt for Nanami in this moment because I was like, there is nothing scarier late at night than walking by yourself and hearing someone behind you. That is so terrifying. And I felt for her in this moment. Now, here's the thing. She walks, and I agree, Nanami running away, being like, she tried to hear, who was behind her, and then takes a run for it, and then she's like, oh shit, and then goes under the overpass and falls down, and this whole scene where she's nearly hit by a car, obviously, here's the thing, the whole, like, the potted plant, the stairs, the horse, we'll talk about that, that was all the plot of the boy, right, of him. But this one scene with the car was not the boy. Like, the boy did not get in a car and nearly hit her. It was a woman that opened up the car afterwards, right? And then there's a man with the sweater vest and the hair that is off to the side that she looks up and sees. And he looks like a teenager. He looks like at least not a middle school or elementary school person, right? So whoever that is still out there. Now, I have my theory. My theory is, because we know from the OP that Nanami has like an outfit on and is fencing, which means she's part of the duels. Presumably, unless the OP is just misleading us, which it could very well be misleading us. So we don't know yet. But my theory is that at some point, the lavender-haired prince, whoever he is, if he's, I don't know yet if Anthe is a reincarnation of him or if he's separate. I almost feel like he's separate at this point because the power of Dios seems connected to the prince. So, because the prince gives his power to Anthe, but also gave his power to Utena when she was fighting Saionji the second time. So, the prince seems like a separate character from Anthe and Utena, and that would make sense not only with the ED because it's him and the two of them, but there are the three roses in the OP suggesting it's the prince and the two of them. How they're all connected and how this all works, we don't know yet as the audience, but my guess is the prince is separate. My guess is also the prince has been giving all of these rings to each individual person. Why? We don't know. The end of the world, is the end of the world the prince? Maybe, who knows? But I have a feeling, my theory is that this person in the shadows is coming after Nanami to try to give her a ring and get her involved in all of this. Now, whether that's true or not, I don't know. But I don't think the boy, we'll get his name in a second. You'd think I would know after she said it 20 times, but it's escaping me. But I don't think he's him. I think that the whole thing of him chasing her down the overpass and then walking away when the lady stopped, I think that's not the boy. I think that it's the prince or something equivalent trying to give her a ring to get her involved in all this mess. That's my theory. I could be wrong. But this lady was so kind of rude. Like, this lady, like, she said, "Hey, are you okay? Hello." And of course, Nanami is too busy focused on the guy in front of her that was stalking her. And she's like, "Oh shit, who are you?" And she's like, "Are you?" And then she says, "Weird girl." And this is the part that got me, was the lady in the car. The lady in the car that nearly ran over Nanami, nearly killed someone, says, "Weird girl. I don't know why I bothered worrying." Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that this girl that was probably distraught from you nearly hitting her with your car seems weird to you and is in a state of shock. I love that this woman just like assumed her state of shock was just her being weird, and that also was an excuse for her to not be worried about nearly hitting her. I was like, oh my god, what a bitch. So yeah, I felt sorry for Nanami. Poor Nanami. Yeah, look out, Nanami-sama. Shit. So yeah, anyway, we go back to this school, and Kiryuu is like, "Someone's after your life." What's interesting is that Kiryuu does not seem worried about Nanami. Now, granted, he probably thinks that she's just being, over the top and, being a diva. But I'm honestly surprised he isn't more concerned for her. But Kiryuu also strikes me as somebody that is very confident in himself and very assured that, well, if there was a problem, I would know about it and I'll take care of it. Like, he seems like that type of person that would not be bothered by anything that would be like an instance of, an instance of worry, right? Mickey is interesting in this episode. We'll talk about him. And she's like, somebody's trying to push me down the staircase and do that. And she's like, now the moment when Nanami like crawls over the table and Miki's like in the middle of my breakfast. And she's like, it's somebody who's probably, then she gets kind of the diva-ness that we normally associate with Nanami, where, yeah, she's worried about somebody trying to take her life. But then she's like, it's probably somebody that's jealous of how popular, cute, and refined I am. And at that point, Kiryuu is like, "Oh, you're just trying to be like weirdly flirty with me. Whatever. I was worried. You're just being ridiculous." And it's like, no, I genuinely feel like she is concerned. She just can't help. Be herself. Also, I think it's interesting to note that Kiryuu's like, "I have student council business to deal with," and Mickey's right there on the student council being like, "What student council business? We haven't called a meeting. The organs aren't playing." The organs aren't playing. We're not going up to a secret room in a tower. Like, are you sure? So that to me says that Kiryuu, since he's the president, does some things that Mickey doesn't know about, that the other student council may not know about. What that entails, who knows? Maybe it's involving buying boxing gloves and a ring for this episode. But yeah, Kiryuu also in that moment, it kind of hints to the fact that he takes the student council business. If there's a ladder of precedence, the student council and end of the world apocalypse business, that's at the top, and then his sister is a rung below it. Which you can take for what you will. I do feel bad for Nanami, though. I liked this interaction between Mickey and Nanami, though, where she's like, somebody could be trying to hurt me and, could be gunning for my life. And we have, like, all the girls that, like, are her posse. And I like that Mickey tries to, like, relate to her in that moment where she's left alone. And while they're playing baseball, she's like, my brother's so cruel. And Mickey's like, yeah, sibling relationships are complex. And I like that we have that tie-in from last episode where Mickey's like, yeah, me and my twin sister, we do not see eye to eye. And I'm not about to tell you that my twin sister's been messing around with your brother. Not about to say that because that would get you into a whole frenzy. Mickey is surprisingly reserved here because Mickey could say something about his twin sister, like getting it on with Kiryuu, but we're not going to bring that up because that's just going to put Nanami into even more distress. Which again, points out that there's stuff about Kiryuu that Nanami doesn't know, like what her brother does when he womanizes all of these. She seems very oblivious to the fact that Kiryuu womanizes everyone. It's just Utena that she notices because he seems like he just loves them and leaves them with all these other women, but Utena he's actively pursuing, and that's why Nanami's kind of like against her. But I do like Mickey and Nanami's relationship, which has kind of been foreshadowed even back during episode 4 with the piano where she was always around. That part, it's good to see that continuity. And then she gets hit with the baseball by Utena. Now, granted, I love Utena in the baseball uniform and her as I don't know if she was a pitcher or she was in the outfield, what the deal was. Girl. Also, the idea that their uniforms, everything, the boxing gloves, the baseball uniforms, they are all red and green to match the Rose theme. It's so gaudy, but it somehow works with the baseball uniform. I think because there's like a mint green and a teal over it. I think the different shades of green help make it work with the one shade of red. I don't know. I usually red and green, I think of Christmas and I think of it being garish, but it somehow works in this series in a weird way. But the uniform looks great on Utena. She looks wonderful. I love how peppy she is in this episode. And Nanami's like, I hate you. It's so infuriating. And so I love the girls holding her back. And Utena's like, I just want the ball. Again, there are a lot of stylistic choices in this episode that are really, really good. And I like a lot. Like when they walk into the hallway, there's the windows and the light just pouring in. That's so visually pretty. I think that that's really cool. I also like that Utena, even though Utena doesn't necessarily get along with some of these characters, she agrees to like work with them and go from place to place with them, which I really like. So for example, Nanami's been kind of a bitch to Utena before, and especially Anthe, but Anthe's kind of absent this episode. But, I also like the fact that Mickey's like, I have a rivalry with you, Utena, to get Anthe's hand. But here, they're all walking together and talking about the scenario. I like it. It's like they can be rivals and they can have like different motivations and different, things that they're working towards, but they still work together to help each other. I'm like, it's a great message for this show, right? And Utena's like, I'm not trying to kill you. And then Nanami says, you're trying to seduce my brother. And Utena's like, hey, he's the one making passes at me. I'm not interested in your brother, even though he is very handsome and mysterious. And Nanami is just, she's like, well, how full of yourself. Nanami thinks so highly of her brother that she can't believe the possibility that someone would turn him down. And to be fair, since Kiryuu is a womanizer, and he has been, very flirtatious with lots of women, and none of them have turned him down. The concept that Utena could turn him down seems so foreign to Nanami and not possible, which again, might suggest that Utena's not into guys. Who knows? Maybe it's just Kiryuu she's not into. She seems interested in the prince, but we'll get into that, I'm sure, as we go in this series, but she's not interested in Kiryuu. So then they notice there's a keep out sign on the door. Now, why there's a keep out sign and why Kiryuu felt the need. I think it's interesting that Kiryuu was so adamant on getting her to spray the garden for bugs, and she didn't want to kill the bugs. Now, you could look at this one of two ways. Either one, this episode is just ridiculous fodder, and it's just supposed to be funny. So Kiryuu being adamant about her killing the bugs is just to create a misunderstanding that will lead to the rest of the plot of this episode. That is likely what it is. It's nothing to be taken seriously. It's just supposed to be a miscommunication that makes Nanami freak out, makes her go and do all of these things, and that's all there is to it. And then it's resolved by the end of the episode. The other way you could look at it is that there is a reason the garden has to be tended and it has to be maintained, and Kiryuu is making sure that that happens, and that's the student council business he's dealing with Anthe. One thing that is fascinating about this is it almost seems like the former, because if this were really like contingent to the plot, Anthe would probably say something along the lines of, well, I can't kill the bugs in the garden unless Utena tells me so, but she does it here anyway. So that makes me think that, or maybe it is that within the garden, the rules of the Rose Bride don't apply. Maybe that's it. Who knows? Who even knows? But I think it's the former. I think it was just to create this miscommunication so that Kiryuu and Nanami, she could be like, how dare you, you know, have this horrible relationship with me, brother, and betray me. I do love the idea. I love the symbolism of the red rose with the grayscale. And when he picks up the red rose, it's like there's the pot with the flower. That is so funny to me. Just him picking up the flower pot, and that's what like falls on her. That's hilarious. And she's the one that cuts it. Yes. So then, of course, Nanami gets mad. She gets mad and confronts him, and he's like, I don't think you're a nuisance. And then poor Nanami with her little sad face. Like, I do feel for her. She's such a diva, but I kind of have a soft spot for diva over-the-top characters that are slightly antagonistic. I do have a soft spot for them. So, and she can be mean, but this episode kind of shows where it's coming from and kind of her mentality that she's just kind of immature. And it's fine. I think that it all kind of like makes sense after a while. I'm like, oh, that's fine. Poor Nanami. And then I like Utena being like, I'm disappointed in you. Even if you're student council president, you can't just kill your own sister. They're so nonchalant about like him wanting to kill her. Like, forget calling the police. Forget telling the principal. Like how dare you, Kiryuu? I'm disappointed you want to commit homicide. And he's like, what? He's like, what are you even talking about? He's like, we're killing the bugs. And they're like, oh. 'Tis a misunderstanding. That is so funny to me. The tick killer. Okay. But yeah, poor Nanami. She's like, someone trying to take my life turned out to be none other than my beloved brother. Such a betrayal. I might as well drop dead. The funny thing about that is, okay, again, I talked about RuPaul's Drag Race at the beginning of this, and then during the OP. There is a queen, Valentina, who all of the other drag queens kind of joke that she, like, she's Latinx, and they try to talk about how, like, her dream is to be in a telenovela, and that she's always very dramatic, and when she's on camera during the show, everything's like the camera's flashing, and she's like, how could this be? What about this drama? It's all gauged towards me, and she's very over the top. I love Valentina, though, because it's very much, that's just her personality. It's over the top. It's wonderful. It's TV gold, and Nanami gives me such Valentina vibes. I'm like, yes, you are Valentina, telenovela, this soap opera I'm the star of. This horse, though! If you've read Berserk, it's not in the anime, it's in the manga of Berserk. There's a horse, it's a lot more sinister than this one, but it's drawn about the same way. And, like, okay, why is there a horse on the loose in the school? Why are there chickens? None of that makes sense! If it had been outside in the courtyard, where we know that there's probably like, it's probably like Shiratorizawa and Haikyuu, where they probably have horses and they do horseback riding, and it's because it's a bougie school. Yeah, sure, okay, I would have bought that. I would have been like, oh no, a horse got out of the stable and it's running towards her. But it's in the hallway of a school. No. I guess they had to do it inside the school because the corridor is narrow and there was no way for her to, she had to like get thrown out of the way by the kid. But you could have had her like on a bridge or something outside. You could have made it work. But that is just, the fact that there are chickens there. And what's so funny is we talk about, you know, episode 1 and the notes in the intro discussion about the creator Ikuhara trying to, you know, pitch the show to the stakeholders. I just imagine that it's been going well. You're 5 episodes in, and then here comes the pitch for the animators for episode 6, and they all just kind of look at it and look up at Ikuharu like, wait, what? Because you have a horse and chickens in the hallway. You have a bull roaming through the streets in Japan. You have a kangaroo fighting in a schoolyard. I mean, there's a lot in this episode that I'm sure they're like, well, we're already 5 episodes in. We can't turn back now. It's so silly. But it's kind of hilarious. And yes, then this kid like, are you hurt, milady? And his whole goal is to be like her brother and rescue her. And she's just like in a Unico trance. Mitsuru Suwabuki. Yep. I love that he has like embroidered handkerchiefs. Which is pretty common in Japan, but that's still really super cute. But yeah, she's like, she goes up to him. Yep. Ties it up with the handkerchief. And he's like, I don't deserve the honor of relaying my name. Like, how cool. And then the way that she envisions him in her dreams as being this tall guy. Maybe it was him stalking her from that night. Who knows? Anyway, so we get like the 4-way here. The dining hall, the middle school, the elementary school, the registrar's office. So there is this. So this whole school is pretty big, right? It goes from elementary to high school, which is interesting to me because I don't think we've had any mention of the elementary school until now. I'm going to guess that Mitsuru is probably in the 6th grade, which is still, or the 5th grade, which is still elementary school. And he's probably like 3 years younger than her, which is still very young, you know, especially considering this. I also like the fact that, well, here's the thing. The fact of Nanami being in middle school, she doesn't view this relationship between her and Mitsuru as sexual at all. It's literally just she loves her brother, he protects her, and he sets this standard, and she doesn't think that any other guy can meet this standard. So it's not necessarily that she romantically wants to be with Kiryuu, but the fact that he protects her and he sets this high standard for her, she doesn't think any other men can live up to it, which, fair. That makes me view that relationship a lot better than just like, you know, it's not Cersei and Jaime Lannister necessarily. And so she probably views Mitsuru kind of like Kiryuu in that you're this dashing white knight on a horse protecting me. That's the kind of relationship that I have with my brother. You can imitate that. But there's nothing sexual or romantic about it. She just gets jealous when someone tries to get the affections or attention of her brother Kiryuu away from her, which is why she gets so down and out about Utena. The thing that kind of complicates it all that Miki is not telling Nanami, and that's probably good Nanami doesn't realize, is that Kiryuu is a sexual person. Quite a lot. He is a very sexual person. And I'm like, aren't you supposed to be like in middle school, like 14, sir? I don't believe that for a second. You're acting like a 20-year-old man, or at least a 16 or 17-year-old high schooler, if anything. You know, when I was in middle school, I was like Nanami. I was not thinking about sex or romance when I was in middle school. No, man, not at all. So that part's interesting to me. But the idea of a prince. Also, I think it's important to know the idea of a prince to Nanami is not something romantic or sexual, but that instead it's the concept of someone protecting them and caring about them and showing affection, which you could argue is kind of how Utena relays that role of a prince as well. So that's good. I honestly, though, this guy that's like the soccer coach, hi, who's he? Can we watch a whole series of him? Like, he seems older for sure. Like, he's like a young adult soccer, like, PE teacher, but hello. And then, we'll say, it's like this show, high 90s, it's like the older man that's the handsome soccer coach. We're like, oh man, didn't think she had such older taste, but okay. But then when it's like now granted, he's older, so again, I get that. But like the other guy that's not as attractive, they're like, what an uggo. How can she like him? And I'm like, oof. Oof. But then, nope, it's the kid. Yeah, Mitsuru. His little purple tights. And interestingly enough, the purple tights, again, we talk about the prince, the power of Dios, him having the lavender hair. This kid has lavender tights. So it's like, there is a little bit of visual confusion there where it kind of throws the reader off a little bit. And then she's like, will you be my boyfriend? And they're all like, excuse me? Like, what? Like, how's this? I think it's funny. He reminds me of Andrew from Sailor Moon. Then we have the two Greek choir. I like to make the gurgling noises of the pot, like a cappella. That's really cool. But they talk about cooking the food, but then the food isn't cooked properly. It's undercooked and burnt. And it's not good enough to eat, right? And then they're like, oh, fresh air is the best seasoning. This little message here was kind of weird, because at first I thought when they were talking about it being undercooked or burnt, it was like, oh, you didn't pay attention to the recipe well enough and it ruined it, which I thought was going to kind of relate to Nanami and Mitsuru. But then they're like, oh, fresh air is the best seasoning. So I guess when they're like, once you get all of the communication out in the open and you figure out, it almost feels like that this Greek choir moment, this episode, is talking about miscommunication and not doing things properly, or not reading all of the instructions, not getting the full picture of what you're supposed to do. So you need to go out and air all the laundry out, figure out the communication, and that will help solve the problem. Or it could just be randomness. But that was just my interpretation of it in the moment. So yeah. So then we have this scene of Mickey and Utena talking. And I love the back and forth where the moment that the conversation gets kind of awkward and it's stuff neither of them want to talk about, they instantly talk about the cafeteria food instead. Like, what a lovely day we're having. And it's like, that's not what we're talking about. That part's really funny to me. Being like, and she's like dating an elementary schooler. And Miki is like, the target of her affections will always be Kiryuu. He's just, he's just replacing him at the moment. I like Miki saying, was that tasteless? Should I have said that? And then we have, again, talk about the visual like rhetoric in this scene. You have the two pillars that are pointing the shadows in one direction. They're each hitting a table with two people that are both sitting side by side, sequenced in a different way. And in the center, you have Miki and Utena on opposite sides of each other. The drinks are opposite of the plates. The symmetry in this scene is really visually striking. And I think it's kind of cool. They just took a second to point it out, but it's still visually cool. I liked it a lot. But yeah. And she's like, well, aren't they siblings? The Nanami and Prez. And then he's like, she has brother worship. And having the best guy in the world by her side, all the others are leftovers. Which I find it interesting that Miki is talking about this. Because again, Miki is kind of like, you have Miki and Kiryuu, who are both brothers. They're both kind of prodigies, like the one's a student, like Miki is, he's a prodigy in his own right, the musician. Kiryuu is the student council president. He's like the handsome guy, the popular guy on campus that all the girls like. They're both like kind of idolized in ways. But then you have Nanami versus Miki's twin sister. Nanami like worships her brother because he's so perfect to her and she doesn't think any other guys can compare. But then you have the sister of Miki who doesn't like him. And she's like, yeah, my brother's this big shot and whatever, but I'm going to do my own thing. So they have totally different attitudes about it. And maybe that's why Miki reacts a certain way to Nanami and her brother, because he kind of like, maybe he realizes that him and his own sister are not like that. And Utena's like, okay. She's like, well, this whole thing seems like a shock to her, but she's got quite the imagination. And then it's like, they see the two of them, they look more like siblings than a couple. Yeah, they do. And that's kind of the one thing that sold me on this episode, is that for Nanami, the concept of her perfect guy, it's not really like a romantic boyfriend. It's like a sibling. And she wants a sibling to protect her and keep her safe. And I'm like, okay, all right, I feel that. I'm glad that that's kind of the route that she took with Mitsuru, because I was like, is this going to get real awkward real quick? But it really doesn't. It's played more for laughs. And so then another thing too, tastefulness. I am all about the tastefulness of this episode, because I've been watching a lot of stuff where I'm like, let's be tasteful. The girls changing in the phys ed for tennis, there's a curtain not showing their bodies exposed. It's just them changing, whatever. And then it's played up as a joke where she has Suabuki in the locker with her tennis gear ready to go. That was so cute. That was hilarious. And then she shows him like help. The part that got me was when he's helping her with the study manual. The solutions manual, madam. That's so funny. I love that. And then her using him as the easel. It's great. And this part, though, the best part in the whole damn episode was when they were like, wow, is he even a boyfriend or is he just like a bodyguard? And then out of nowhere, Mickey's like, I don't know. And then Saionji just, we haven't seen him since episode 2. We haven't seen him in 4 weeks, in a month. And he just inserts himself into the scene. No calling attention to himself, nothing. He just inserts himself in. And it's like, no matter how much she may tyrannize him, he's simply happy to be near his beloved. That is one form of love. He's trying to justify her actions because that's the way he treats Anthe, right? He's like, love can manifest in many different forms. I would classify the love between Anthe and I as a furtive love as well. And then, like, the exchange diary, I like that he just pulls it out of his bare-chested pocket. And then I just love that he's sitting there. Neither of them acknowledge him. It's like the elevator scene in Neon Genesis. Neither of them acknowledge, and it goes on for an unreasonably long time. Played deadpan. And then he's like, they aren't responding to him. So he goes, a furtive love. And Utena's like, no one asked. They just ignore him. If he just gets ignored the rest of the series, I will laugh my ass off. Oh my god, that was the funniest damn scene. The funniest damn scene. But what I love about it is it's like Saionji is trying to relate. He can relate to how Nanami is treating Mitsuru by being like, well, yeah, she's treating him like a servant and a bodyguard, but it's a furtive love, and that's how I was with Anthe. So see, I was justified in how I was treating Anthe, and Utena's like, we don't care. She's like, Nanami is not slapping around Mitsuru. She's treating him with respect. You didn't do that to Anthe, so you don't get to talk. You don't get to mansplain. Get out. That is the funniest part of this whole episode. I lost it. I cannot believe that happened. That was amazing. Absolutely amazing. So yeah. So that's pretty much what goes down. Oh my god. I crack up. But yeah, so I loved this moment. It was so good. And that's all he's there for. Then he disappears. It's just like, oh yeah, this character's still here, by the way. He's still around. We may see him in the future. I do think, though, that how she treats... I mean, we get how she treats Mitsuru as a comparison for Saionji treating Anthe, but I also realized that could be, a comparison of how some of these people treat Anthe as the Rose Bride. They just treat her as a bodyguard or as a servant or as someone to just be used and not be their own individual. And that's kind of, starts to become, a concern from Utena is, Nanami, are you treating him right? And even if he says, because Mitsuru says, well, I want to protect Nanami, that's my whole role. And Utena's like, is this really what you want? Or are you just doing this because you're kind of confused? Then we have these 3 individuals, Suzuki, Yamada, and Tanaka. These 3 mofos. Like the 3 Spider-Mans from that one meme. Am I right? I'm just like, what? I want to get a screenshot of all 3 of them. Now, these 3 guys, I'm glad this scene happens because they're like, well, Nanami, well, you turned us all down to go out with a child. Are you trying to make fools of us? And then she's like, who are you? And they're like, we wrote you love letters every day. Don't you remember us? I'm glad this scene happens because this is a very toxic trait that I honestly see with a lot of men. From dating experience, I have seen this a lot. And it is the concept that and doesn't necessarily happen with men. I'm just talking from my own experience. If you're a man, you may have experienced this with a woman. I totally could see it happening. But I will say, only because I've dated men before, I have seen this trope of where guys are like, what? But you like him, but you don't like me? Like, what? But I wrote you love letter. And I guess it has happened with women, so we can't say it's just a male trait. I have seen, like, a friend of mine date girls and had other girls react this way too. So it can go from both ends. I don't want to make it a gendered thing. I'm just talking from my own experience that I have had guys be like, well, but I showed you affection. And I'm like, just because you show someone affection does not mean they have to reciprocate it. And I will say it for those in the back. And you all know, I'm sure, and we'll clap back in the comments, but just because someone says I love you does not mean you are required to answer them, to reciprocate, or to agree. You can be like, well, gee, thanks. I don't love you. Sorry. Bye. I think that's a problem, and it leads to a lot of incidents, is because some people, I think that what leads to them making bad decisions and potentially assaulting people, potentially doing horrible things to others, is they can't accept the fact that just because you show kindness and love to someone does not mean that person is obligated to reciprocate it. And I've even experienced on this channel shades of that, where I have had people like DM me or message me, and not necessarily on Patreon, but like on Twitter, or they'll be like, well, hey, I've watched your content, so you need to read my comment. Or I've watched your content, so you need to like watch this show I've requested. And I've had people actually say that, and I'm like, no. I'm like, and I even had like one person one time comment being like, you know, I've supported you for years, and I've supported you, and you should pay attention to what I say to you. And I'm like, whoa. I was like, and this was somebody on YouTube, and I told my moderators, I was like, first of all, you've been watching me for free for years. I don't have control over that. I mean, I'm glad you've supported me, but just because you've watched me for free and enjoyed my content, that doesn't mean that I'm beholden to anything to you. I don't even know you. And that's kind of that weird parasocial aspect about it, being like, I don't know who you are. I can't help that you've watched my content and enjoyed it, but you want me to do something for you. I'm like, that's not how this works. And so it's been kind of an eye-opening experience being a content creator, because some people, they expect you to reciprocate based on what they've done in watching and supporting you. And I'm like, I'm grateful, but I don't think I should be beholden to do anything for you. I don't understand like how that works. And granted, you know, if people are patrons, I want to support back in having polls to pick shows that they're interested in and doing things like that. But especially on YouTube, when you're just watching me for free, I don't know you anything. And even if you do pay, I don't necessarily, I'm not, you know, I don't have to reciprocate. It's just, you know, you're being nice and giving me support. So thank you. But I kind of get where Nanami's like, I don't know you and have to, like, if I choose to date this guy who's in elementary school and ignore you, that's my own decision. I don't have to, you know, do anything for you. And they're just like there's a lot of toxicness in the way these three Tweedledee and Tweedledums act. But Suwabuki, he ends up fighting them all. And granted, this little kid, these three guys, they're such like douches where they just are fighting. All three of them gang up on a kid. Really? I do love Nanami's like, oh, the weather's just perfect today. I'm like, you're such a damn diva. I'm glad Utena calls her out on it though. Where I like the one body that just floats up. That part was hilarious. And she's like, oh, well done. And he's like, yeah, I protected you. And now Utena calls her out and says, hey. Like, he desperately fought to protect you, but you just used him as a bodyguard. You didn't, like, contribute any to this. And I like that Miki's like, you know, you're kind of mistaken. And she's like, I am mistaken. And I'm like, the pun there was really funny. I love that. And she's like, I'm dating him. And she's like, isn't he more of an underling than a bodyguard or a boyfriend for you? And she's like, why are you so in love with Nanami? And he says it's a fateful encounter. And he talks about back in the day when a raging runaway bull got loose. Where this giant longhorned bull came from, who knows? But Nanami fell down, as she seems prone to do. I love this one screenshot of this guy looking terrified about a bull. I'm going to take a picture of that. But Kiryuu steps in. Now, Kiryuu steps in and saves her. When did puberty hit Kiryuu? When he was 8? How is he, like, already as tall as he is now and, like, fully matured when they're supposed to be in middle school? I am blown away. Is he a vampire? Has he not aged? And then he, like, takes her home. And that influences Mitsuru to decide that he wants to protect her one day. Because it was really cool. He's like, I want to be a heroic big brother like a gentleman. And Utena's like, well, that's being like a sibling and a protector, not exactly a boyfriend. There's a difference there. And then he's been staging all this. I like that Utena and Miki are like, you've been staging all this? This is all your fault? This is everything? And he just pulls the cactus out of nowhere. But the best part was, I love Nanami just with the listening equipment and the megaphone. At this point, it's all metaphorical. Like her with the listening equipment, her with the megaphone, it's all symbolic and a metaphor for her listening in and eavesdropping and her expressing herself loudly. Like, the show is stylistic, but at times it is kind of like theater, which, again, we have the Greek choir literally in the center of the episode, but it is kind of like theater where there are these props and devices that are making it more like hyperbolic how things are exemplified and portrayed and represented. So hilarious, just hilarious. And she's like, that's something a kid would do. And then poor Mitsuru, she's like, because of you, I called my big brother a meanie. Then all of a sudden, there's a damn kangaroo. A kangaroo loose. Why? We don't know. How this kangaroo got loose and got boxing gloves? Who knows? I love that they're all like, wait a minute, what? And then, yeah, I love that this panel of this kangaroo about to bop Nanami. Things I never thought I would see in Utena, let me tell you. And then Mitsuru ends up getting hit by it anyway. And I like Utena tries to, like, whack the kangaroo, but it punches through it. I'm like, what? PETA would have a field day with this episode, let me tell you. But then, yeah, I like that Mitsuru is about to, like, face off against the kangaroo, and Nanami saves him. Like, again, what I like about Nanami is that she's a diva, she's over the top, she's a lot, but then when it comes down to it, whenever Mitsuru is about to get bopped by the kangaroo, after fighting these 3 guys, she runs off and saves him. And she's like, you have to run, stupid. And she says, my brother is my brother and you are you. Quit trying to be someone that you're not. Oh, I love it. And she's like, I'm not going to cry for you if you die doing something like this. That was really sweet. Like, Nanami, I like that her character reveals her true colors. And she's a diva, but it is really sweet that she eventually helps him, you know? I want to get a shot of her, like, with these roses. Like, running there. Yeah. And then, yep. Awesome. We're going to get a shot of that. But then, yeah, Kiryuu just can't let the episode go on without being amazing here. This episode was just so manic, and I kind of loved it. It was just ridiculous. I can't imagine the animators. They probably had such a field day with all of this. How could you not? But then, yeah, Kiryuu jumps over, like, with the mat, with the lighting, and then just him. He knocks out the tooth guard, the gum protector on the kangaroo, and then gives us that swoony shot of him. Like, come on now, come on. And then Choo-Choo rings the bell. What a wacky day at high school. Can you imagine? Can you imagine such a day at high school? Can you? Like, some of these screenshots, I'm like, I never thought I would imagine in Utena, but here we are. And then I love that she breaks up with Mitsuru being like, let's break up. And he's like, sure. It reminded me of Daryl and, oh gosh, her in The Office. It's like Daryl and, oh gosh, what's her name? It's Ryan and is it Mindy? Mindy's the actress that plays her, but Kelly Kapoor. Kelly Kapoor and Daryl, when they break up, she's like, we're gonna break up. And he's like, cool. So like Mitsuru's losing nothing breaking up with her. I do hope that they adopt him into the family. That would be really cute. I do like the idea that Nanami has this little brother and big brother protecting her. It's very sweet. And then Utena just looks back at her like, what a weird family. Utena looking back at her is like in Ferris Bueller's Day Off when the principal sees like Ferris picking up Sloane and he's supposed to be pretending to be her dad, but they like make out in the car and the principal's like, so that's how it is in their family. That's literally the expression that Utena has in that moment. She's like, Kiryuu is no ordinary guy. He is not. No. And he brings back that little smolder face. What a crazy guy. Wild. Absolutely wild. What an episode. Oh my God. Honestly, for an episode that some people will probably argue is a throwaway episode, I loved this episode. I thought it was so good. Like, what a palate cleanser. Eat the banana, cleanse the palate, get ready for the next. Choo-Choo's been handing me bananas to cleanse the palate. I'm so ready. That was absolutely wonderful, and I loved it. So, yeah. Yes! Yes, yes, yes. Anyway, I'm very excited to hear your thoughts down below. What a fun episode. I'm excited to hear your thoughts down below. I can't wait to hear the production notes on this one, by the way. But yeah, next week we'll start episode 7 and go from there. So I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'll be back real soon with more of Revolutionary Girl Utena. Bye.